The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Right, we now come to questions. The Secretary of State for Education, Liz Twist.
Question 1, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I will take questions 1, 6, 11, 12 and 15 together. There is nothing more important than ensuring everybody in our country, regardless of need, gets the very best education possible. That's why special educational needs and our Special Educational Needs and Alternative Provision Improvement Plan will ensure that all children get the support that they need to reach their potential. We've opened 108 special free schools since including 15 since September, and we've also launched a £70 million change programme to test and refine our systemic reforms benefiting every region in England. Earlier this month, I announced an extension to our short breaks programme, and we have a plan, and we're delivering on it.
Liz Twist.
But, Mr Speaker, today many parents of children, including those in my constituency, with children with special educational needs, are at their wits' ends. Either they're fighting to get an EHCP, or they're struggling to access the right support when they get an EHCP for their child. This is a waste of public money, a waste of parents' energy, and too often a waste of their child's precious potential. Does the Minister agree with my constituents that the system is broken? Because that's what they feel.
I would agree that there has been an absolute increase in special educational needs in the past 5, 6, 7 years, largely because we know more, but also COVID has added some pressure on the system. We've expanded the system, and we really do care to make sure that all children with special educational needs, even more than before, get the right help that they need. We have an improvement plan in place. It was published in March 2023, and it really focuses on early identification and improved support all the way through the journey. We're training many more people, and we're putting more support in place for your constituents.
Dalton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In smaller and rural communities like mine in West Lancashire, populations and services are often very sparsely located, and SEND students are often having to travel upwards of an hour to reach any provision, or are having to go without. What is the government's plan to address that issue?
Yes, well, what we've been trying to do is to make sure that we increase the number of places, both within mainstream, but also within special educational needs and alternative provision settings. As I said, we have 108 more special educational needs schools already built and 76 more approved. And we've worked with many local authorities, including in rural areas, to make sure that we can work with them to make sure they get the provision they need.
Hopkins.
Speaker, every child with special educational needs or disabilities should receive the high-quality support they deserve, but schools and councils do not have the necessary resources to meet increasing demand and rising costs. So what discussions is she having with the Secretary of State for levelling up housing and communities on the funding and powers available to councils to improve SEND provision?
Yes, I mean, that is one of the reasons why the high needs budget is up by over 60% in the last 4 years, and in 24-25 will be £10.5 billion. We're also supporting local authorities with financial deficits through the safety valve and delivering better value programmes. And in most of the constituencies, including the Honourable Lady's area, the funding has gone up by 25 to 35%.
Debbie Abrahams.
Mr Speaker, I also have several constituents' cases in my Oldham, East and Saddleworth constituency where children and young people can be waiting months, if not years, for not just assessment but for the plan to enable them to their needs to be addressed. SENS have reported that less than half of local authorities have multisensory impairment teachers, and the National Autistic Society report 3 in 4 parents say their children's school places doesn't fully cover their needs. So what is the government doing about this?
Well, our plan, which is really to introduce national consistency and standards, which we'll publish in 2025, we'll deliver that through local partnerships and inclusion, and we'll also digitise records and make it much more transparent for parents to see what's happening. In terms of improving support and mainstream support, we will improve early language support. We're working with ICBs to improve the support for neurodiversity in schools. We have autism training as well. 100,000 teachers have received that training, and also additional SENCO training, as well as that vital early language support.
Dan Carden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My office operates a regular advice surgery for parents of children with special educational needs and disabilities in conjunction with the University of Liverpool Law Clinic. I'd like to pay tribute to them today. There are simply not enough places in mainstream schools or in special schools. And I want to ask the Secretary of State, children from the most deprived areas are less likely to be identified with SEND compared with similar children from more affluent areas. And what is the government doing to make sure that children in constituencies like mine are identified early and can get the help that they require?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman makes a vital point. Early identification is absolutely key in providing that support and making sure that that support impacts as early as possible. I'm very happy to understand more about the places. We have had lots of bids from local authorities. That's why I say we have many more special educational needs schools that have either been built or are being built. I announced 15 just very recently. I don't know if his local area bid into those or not, but we do have many schemes to make sure that we can improve, and local authorities have financing for this, to improve the number of places within mainstream schools, but also special educational needs schools as well.
Dame Priti Patel.
Speaker, could the Secretary of State share with the House how more work is being done and support given to local authorities to address the whole issue of children with educational needs and disabilities who are still, I'm afraid, being placed out of their own counties and localities to receive the essential support that they need? In Essex in particular, this problem is still ongoing. It affects all our colleagues across Essex. I do pay tribute to our county council. They're doing incredible work in this area. In fact, they are well rated, but to be quite frank, they need help, assistance and support from central government.
I thank my right honourable lady for her question, my right honourable friend. I mean, there's a number of things. Obviously, putting £2.6 billion into increasing the number of places, and I know members across the House will have heard of additional schools going within their areas, but also to make sure that this plan, this improvement plan that we published in March 2023 is actually implemented and implemented well. We have a £70 million change programme, which we're working with the local authorities to make sure that this goes from a piece of paper to actually being something that's implemented on the ground and felt by all of our constituencies and all those families with children with special educational needs.
Well, Jayawardena.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend update the House on the provision of training in SEND during initial teacher training to make sure that more teachers are aware of the support that children might need, and also the recruitment of specialists such as educational psychologists and speech and language therapists?
Yes, we are implementing a golden thread of high-quality teacher training reforms to ensure that teachers have the skills that they need. The department's been exploring opportunities to build expertise through a review of the initial teacher training core content framework and the early career framework to identify how we can equip new teachers to be more confident in meeting the needs of children and young people with SEND. There'll be more investment in educational psychologists, another 400, more investment in early years SENCOs, another 7,000 as well.
Will Quince.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very similar to my colleague from Hampshire. I welcome the introduction of a new SENCO MPQ, and I declare an interest as my wife is a SENCO. But to create a truly inclusive school environment, all teachers need the knowledge, the skills and the practical training to support children with special educational needs and disabilities. So what steps is my right honourable friend taking to ensure that initial teacher training gives them that support and training?
Can I thank my honourable friend and also thank him for all the work he has done in this area. We worked together when he was in the role of Children and Families, and I was working in the Health Department, and I know it's something that we both care deeply about. As I was saying in answer to the earlier question, there is a golden thread of high-quality teacher training reforms. We will be looking at a revised framework. We will be making sure that we work with providers so that they can make sure that the contracts that we have in place will deliver the very best support that we have for teachers. I think what's really going to be vital and members will feel is the additional 7,000 Senkos as well that are going to be trained in the coming years.
Harriett Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Worcestershire County Council has some very welcome plans to set up a new autism-free school in Malvern. And recently I also visited our place in West Worcestershire, which provides very specialist education, mainly for children with autism. It's an independent provider, and I was wondering if it's the Secretary of State's understanding that independent provision like this would be affected by taxation should the opposition bring in tax on independent schools across this country.
My honourable friend makes a very good point. There are 2,408 independent schools across our country, many of them providing special educational needs support, and many of them providing excellent education in particular specialties. And of course, many of those schools, 2,408 of them, if they are subject to increased taxation, obviously that will make the provision more difficult, and we will have to assess what that will mean.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A number of colleagues have mentioned initial teacher training. Perhaps I can say to them and the Secretary of State, perhaps they should look no further than tomorrow with my 10-minute rule bill that comes into Parliament, which aims to increase and make sure there is autism training for all teachers. Will she back it?
Well, I welcome my honourable friends' work in this area. I mean, of course, initial teacher training courses must equip trainees to meet all the teacher standards, including Standard 5, that teachers must have a clear understanding of the needs of all pupils, including pupils with autism. And through the delivery of our improvement plan, we will develop new practitioner standards to support frontline professionals, including one on autism. And I look forward to him working with us.
Joanna Cherry.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions number 2 and 19 together. Our visa changes strike the right balance, ensuring we have a fair and robust migration policy, but maintaining the UK's place as a top destination for the best and brightest from around the world. And I know that the Honourable Lady will be pleased to know that we continue to attract the best scientists from across the world. We have over 46,000 postgraduate research students from overseas, 41% of the total, producing groundbreaking and collaborative research.
Joanna Cherry.
For his answer, but I'm afraid the evidence doesn't entirely bear out what he's saying, because UCAS figures reveal a notable fall in accepted applications from international students. And both Harriett and Napier universities in my Edinburgh South West constituency are highly sought-after destinations for international PhD students. And both universities carry out vital scientific research with strong links to commercial and industrial needs, not just in Scotland, but across the United Kingdom and indeed across Europe and the world. But despite this, the government's visa rules are making these universities a far less attractive destination for international students. So my question for the Minister is this. Isn't his colleague, the Honourable Member from Mid-Norfolk and the former Science Minister, really quite right when he says that the UK will never be a science superpower if it's behind a visa paywall?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the Honourable Lady is a stickler for data. Our target was for over 600,000 students, international students every year. We're well over that target. As I say, our visa changes strike the right balance, being fair to taxpayer and ensuring that we have good international students coming to our country.
Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minimum salary requirement for a skilled worker visa is set to increase by 48% from £26,200 to £38,700, jeopardising the prospects of early career researchers and academics coming to the UK. So can the Minister then answer the question that he didn't from Honourable Friend? How will the UK be a science superpower behind that visa paywall?
I think I've set out, we have 36% of university researchers coming out from outside the UK, over 46,000 postgraduate students from overseas, 41% of the total. And what I would say to the honourable gentleman is that the real cost of the SNP's tuition fee policy is that Scottish universities are unable to provide places for local students who are 13% less likely to take a place at a university in Scotland than English students in England.
Lewis.
Will the Minister be investigating the discovery exposed by the Sunday Times yesterday of Russell Group universities taking students with much lower academic qualifications for undergraduate degrees? And when he does so, will he check that the same isn't happening in the postgraduate field, given the much higher fees that are able to be charged for overseas students?
I thank my right honourable friend for his question. He will know that whilst I am a strong supporter of international students, I want a level playing field for all domestic students, for all domestic students as well. I met with Vice-Chancellors only yesterday afternoon, as soon as I'd seen the report in the Sunday Times. And I'm absolutely clear, I've asked the Department for Education to take out an urgent investigation to bad practice by agents where it occurs. I was very disturbed what I saw, and what we want, as I say, is absolute fairness of entry for domestic students as much as international students.
Shadow Minister Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I listened to the Minister's response to the Right Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West. But in December, I was assured also by the Minister that he was committed to the target of 600,000 international students. However, Mr. Speaker, recent research from IDP found that 45% of their August and September applicants to study in the UK would consider changing their study destination if post-study work visa lengths are shortened. So what is his assessment of the impact that any changes to the postgraduate work visa could have on the international education strategy and the sustainability of the sector?
The honourable gentleman, the shadow spokesman, knows that the visa matters are a matter for the Home Office. We've got the Migration Advisory Committee looking at the postgraduate, these are the international student visa route. That will come to its conclusions. But as I keep saying to him, our target was over 600,000 international students a year, and we've well surpassed that.
Gillian?
Number 3, Mr. Speaker.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 3 and 18 together. Tackling persistent absence is my top priority and was indeed last year. I pay tribute to our incredible teachers and heads who've gone above and beyond to get children back to school. We're more than doubling the number of attendance hubs to support 2,000 schools. We're investing £15 million to expand one-to-one mentoring to help 10,000 children, and we'll be requiring all schools to share data to support earlier intervention. Our plan is starting to work, with 380,000 fewer children persistently absent or not attending last year, and numbers continue to fall.
Andrew Gwynn.
But by 2026, 2,435 children in Manchester, 907 in Tameside and 937 in Stockport are set to miss half of their time at school if the current trends continue. Labour has a plan to fix this crisis, backed by Sir Kevin Collins, the government's own former Education Recovery Commissioner. But I have to say to the Secretary of State, if this is her top priority, why isn't it working?
Well, it is working, and of course it's not going to stick on the trajectory because we've already turned around the trajectory. It's already falling since the pandemic in England. Now, obviously, there's no better example of the Labour Party having no plan and just sniping from the sidelines than the question of attendance. I would suggest that you would look potentially at other countries all over the world. This is a global phenomenon. We have daily data which is almost unique, which is why we are now reducing the figures. And if you look at Wales, Labour-run Wales, attendance is much worse, and they now have nearly 8 days lower per pupil in school.
Chiomora.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So yes, the Secretary of State says that keeping children in school is her top priority. But since 2016, persistent absence in Newcastle has more than doubled, and severe absence is up 282%. And she says it's a global phenomenon, but what matters is what happens in schools in Newcastle. So the plan, Labour's plan for schools is supported by Sir Kevin Collins. Why won't she support it? And what is she really going to do about it? Because we need to see change now.
I think the Honourable Lady may have mixed up a couple of things there, but the plan to get children back into school is to have daily attendance data, which we introduced, which we then send out to every single local authorities. Some local authorities don't perform as well, perhaps the Honourable Ladies is one of those, but we send out daily data so that they can identify exactly where the schools are. We're working with attendance hubs, which we're introducing all across the country. For individual one-to-one attention, we have attendance mentors, we have a national campaign, and we have a cross-government action alliance, all of which has meant that now attendance is in England is 7.5% absence compared to 11.5% in Wales, and much, much higher in most countries across the world. We have a plan and we are delivering on it.
Jonathan Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Someone who actually works as a teacher and as a head of year with the overall school responsibility for attendance, what the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, seem to forget is that there is also the role of parental responsibility in all this. And I incurred a large cohort of parents in my time who found that the fines, although given, still ended up cheaper when it came to the holiday funding that they were hoping to save on by going during term time. So is it now not time to ramp up the cost of the fines on parents who choose to needlessly withdraw their children from their education, harming their child's outcomes?
Well, of course, every moment matters in school, and we have improved and increased our school standards. The most important thing is that children are now there. Thanks to the data that we have, we can now see patterns. We can see those that are taking a week off outside of term time. We can see those that have a pattern of behaviour, perhaps taking particular days off. We can go down into the data, and we're about the only country in the world who can do this, rather uniquely positioned to tackle this problem. We can go down into the data, we can work at school level and we can work at local authority level to make sure that every single thing we can do that will improve attendance, we can action.
Ford.
Attendance matters, and we know that some schools and some local authorities have higher attendance rates than others, which is why the Education Select Committee, the Children's Commissioners and others all say their top priority is to make sure that all schools and local authorities follow the best practice guidelines. My private member's bill will make that mandatory. I know the government supports it. Would you take this opportunity to make sure that all colleagues across the House will back the bill and no one objects to it when it has its second reading on Friday, so we can make the best practice mandatory and get our kids back to school?
Well, I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for all her work in this area, and she's absolutely right. The first thing is making sure that we understand that best practice and then make sure that it is rolled out everywhere. There's a lot of work going on in this area. I very much appreciate the initiative that my right honourable friend has introduced, and I would urge all colleagues from across the House to support her in her endeavours.
Minister Catherine McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The millions of children persistently absent from school is a national scandal. And yet government MPs joined together last week to vote against Labour's long-term plan to deal with this issue, putting party above country and children. So far, the government have only announced sticking plaster policies. So will she come forward with a long-term plan to properly address this, or do schools and families have to wait for a Labour government to finally give all children the education they deserve?
Well, certainly not. I mean, Mr. Speaker, a Labour government, school standards would be plummeting back down to where they were the last time they had education under their control. I think they were 27th in the world for maths and 28th for English, if I remember rightly. Standards fall under Labour, and they have absolutely no plans to get children back into school. This government has, as I said, uniquely put in place daily data, which enables you to get down and implement lots of different plans. We're also planning to legislate for children not in school, which I think was about the only thing they had actually put in their plan. We are committed to do that, and we warmly welcome the honourable friend, the MP for Meon Valley's private members bill on the same topic, which we look forward to working with her as it progresses on the second reading, I think the 50th to the 3rd. And I would urge all honourable members to support that bill. Thank you.
Lawrence Session-Lermy.
Question 4, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I do recognise the challenge from falling roles when there is demographic change. And that's why we're changing how the growth and falling roles funding is allocated to local authorities. So it's now based on decreases as well as increases in pupil numbers. We're also giving greater flexibilities to allocate the funding to meet the revenue costs of reducing surplus places.
Lawrence Session-Lermy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that reply. The issue of decline in school roles in London is a big issue, and I've raised it on a number of occasions in this House. And we are seeing families with young children being driven out of London because of the affordability of housing and the cost of living crisis. And the new report out today by London councils shows that the situation is getting even worse. In Lambeth, where my Vauxhall constituency is, we are seeing a 17.5% drop in demand for reception places over the next 5 years. Archbishop Tennyson School, opposite the Oval Cricket Ground in my constituency, closed last year. We need urgent action from the government. The fall in schools roles is helping, but that's just a short term. So will the Minister look at how we can protect our vital education assets, and will the government finally address the cost of living crisis?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And it is true that there is a period of change coming as the bulge in primary school numbers starts to move into secondary. It is important to plan ahead for that. We want to work with local authorities. I know our own local authority in Lambeth is being proactive and looking at amalgamations where necessary. For example, we also have pupil place planning advisors in each region working with local authorities and academy trusts and school resource management advisors to work directly with schools. And there will also be, I think, some repurposing of some space in schools. I'm not speaking specifically about her constituency now. There will be opportunities for more early years provision in some cases, more special educational needs provision, and we will have to be agile and make sure there is still sufficient space for parental choice.
Tim Walton.
Mr Speaker, as the Secretary of State knows, because we share a local authority, when it comes to calculating demand for secondary school places in West Sussex, I'm afraid they get a D-, because last year one of my districts is completely oversubscribed and over 50 children, almost all from one school, were taken out of district to a school that none of them applied for and some of them hadn't heard of. And next year that could be even worse. Despite help from her noble friend Baroness Barron and the Regional Schools Commissioner, West Sussex have still done absolutely nothing to address this shortage of secondary school places. Will he intervene?
Mr Speaker, look, as I was saying to the honourable lady opposite, it is true that there is change as numbers move from primary into secondary. It is important to try and plan ahead. On the specifics of West Sussex, I will of course be pleased to meet with him.
Jill Mortimer.
Question 5, please, Mr Speaker.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I would link this question with question 18 and answer them together. Attendance did decline through COVID. It is now improving, but there's a lot more to do. We are expanding attendance hubs to support nearly 2,000 schools, and we've launched the Moments Matter campaign to remind parents the importance of every single day in school.
Jill Mortimer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Hartlepool, we've seen a rising number of parents and guardians choosing to opt for homeschooled education. As of November, that number had increased to 186. This is more than tripling in 4 years. In addition to this, we have a huge number of children who just simply do not turn up at school. Will my right honourable friend please share the steps he is taking alongside Hartlepool Borough Council to ensure these children are receiving a fair and decent education?
Mr Speaker, I will, and local authorities of course have duties towards those children to make sure all are receiving suitable education and act if not. The consultation we held on revised guidance to help fulfil that responsibility recently closed, and we will, of course, publish the response in due course. And we remain committed to legislation, as my right honourable Fred said, to create statutory children not in school registers to help local authorities to identify those eligible children.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I know from speaking to schools in Wimbledon that
access to mental health support can get pupils back into school or keep them in school. Could my right honourable friend say what plans the department has to roll out more access to that mental health support, so this can be a trend that we see increasing?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can. Of course, there are multiple layers to mental health support, specifically on mental health support teams, which is a programme that we are rolling out gradually across the country. That continues to expand. At the end of March 2023, there were 35% of pupils in schools and further education covered by that, including 47% at secondary. When the figures for this year come out, I expect those numbers to be higher. And unlike the opposition, we are putting this mental health support not only into secondary schools, but also into primary schools where it can make a real big difference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The reality is, with mental health support teams in schools, the funding isn't guaranteed beyond 2025, and actually the coverage is very patchy. Earlier this month, I heard about a teenager in one secondary school in my constituency who hasn't attended for 4 months because of his mental ill health. And the school are absolutely convinced if there had been a dedicated, qualified mental health practitioner in that school, both secondary and in primary schools, we'd be able to improve that attendance. So will he back my 10-minute rule bill that commits exactly to this duty, paid for by trebling the tax on social media companies who are often so often at the root of these problems?
Mr. Speaker, she identifies very important problems, and there definitely are important links between mental health prevalence, mental ill health prevalence, I should say, and non-attendance. And that's one of the benefits that we will get, therefore, from the offer to all state schools and colleges to have a grant to train a senior mental health lead, as well as those wider mental health support teams that I mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the ministers that one of the key things I think is early intervention on this, and I think a lot more needs to be looked at in terms of what can be done at primary school level, because although not entirely, often the signs are already there by the time they get to secondary school. So I wonder whether the minister is saying more on that. And secondly, the actual issue around transition from primary to secondary, again, which is a key part of what we need to look at.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman is, of course, entirely correct, and we do think it is very important to consider the role of mental health in primary school as well as secondary school. Of course, we put mental health education onto the curriculum through RSHE, and we are investing in these mental health support teams that I mentioned, as well as these training grants, and specifically on transition from primary to secondary. Of course, some schools do that very, very well. It can be a very unsettling time for children. It's also a very exciting time, and it's important to make sure that we maximise those benefits. And as I say, there's a lot of very good practice out there.
SNP spokesperson Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In England, school attendance is impacted by off-rolling, a practice that does not exist in Scotland. Now we hear in a report that schools are actively removing GCSE students, not for any behavioural issues, but because they are struggling academically and the school wants to protect its place in league tables. What steps is the Minister taking to address what the Centre for Social Justice has called a system which effectively rewards schools for exiting academically underperforming students?
Mr. Speaker, let me be abundantly clear that off-rolling, that is to say, removing a pupil from the school roll without using a permanent exclusion, is unlawful and it is unacceptable. And it is why it's in the Ofsted framework and strengthened in the revised framework that came out in 2019 to look at this. And of course that can be reflected in the Ofsted report. It also features in what the Teacher Regulation Agency look at, and we again must be abundantly clear that in being involved in off-roading is not not consistent with the conduct we expect of a teacher, and in very serious cases could result in action that way.
Roberts.
Thank you. Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SEND places have increased in Gloucestershire since 2015, and we currently estimate there are 1,700 special educational needs places. Gloucestershire Local Authority has opened 2 additional settings across 2022 and 2023.
Roberts.
Thank the Minister for that response, but there are 120 pupils at the moment who have been assessed as needing special school places, and those places are not available. And over the next couple of years, it looked as if there will be at least 200 more special school places needed in Gloucestershire. Can the Minister look at this situation urgently and see what he can do to help?
We are working closely with local authorities on this. We have allocated over 1.5 billion of high needs capital allocations in the last 2 years for local authorities to create additional places. And Gloucestershire County Council has announced a 200 place moderate and additional learning difficulty school for 4 to 16-year-olds to be delivered through our free school presumption route in early 2026.
Helen Morgan.
There are only 3 specialist schools provided by the state in Shropshire. 2 of them are rated...
It's your question. Are you going to...
Mention Gloucester.
So just as in Gloucestershire, we're very short on specialist schools. 2 of our 3 are rated inadequate and needs improving, and the most vulnerable children are being unable to go to school because need isn't being met. Will the Minister look at what could be done in Shropshire to provide places for these most seriously affected children?
Here.
In addition to working with Gloucestershire, we work with Shropshire as well on their capacity. We've already announced 41 new special free schools with a further 3 in the pipeline.
Patricia Gibson.
Number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I agree that with all the UK has in common, it's vital to be talking about policy issues, frequently including on devolved matters. The last time the UK Education Ministers' Council met was in June last year, hosted by my right honourable friend in Liverpool. I understand it is to the Scottish Government to issue the invitation for the next one, and we await their missive with anticipation.
Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Expanding free school meals has a direct impact on children's health, promoting cognitive development and improving test scores and concentration. The Scottish Government is rolling out universal free school meals for primary school children. What additional financial efforts will he make to address educational inequality, such as supporting and following the example of the Scottish Government to improve outcomes for all pupils?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we await to see the programme fully from the Scottish Government, but what I would say is that on free school meals, it is in recognition of the benefits of free school meals and targeting them to where they can have most effect that we now have 1 in 3 pupils in England eligible for free school meals, as against 1 in 6 when the party opposite was in government.
SNP spokesman Carol Monaghan.
Thank you. But to just be clear, the UK Government at the moment won't even extend free school meals to children in households receiving universal credit. Speaking in Parliament 2 weeks ago, the Children's Commissioner for England urged the UK Government to expand free school meals, stating children with an empty belly cannot learn. So when will this Government follow Scotland's lead in addressing child poverty by rolling out free school meals to all primary school children?
Mr. Speaker, we have extended eligibility for free school meals on 3 occasions, majorly with universal infant free school meals, with the extension of further education students, and most recently with extending the protections for people in transition on universal credit. And I would just say to her gently that we think it is important to target free school meals, but that is just as important for children in secondary school as in primary.
Barry Sherman.
Number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this government is rolling out the largest expansion of childcare in England's history, doubling the amount we spend now. This will enable more children to benefit from high-quality early years education and childcare more of the time, building strong foundations for every child and enabling more parents to work.
Very sure.
Mr. Speaker, why has it taken 14 years to get round it having a plan? They got rid of children's centres, they got rid of Sure Start, and they have not replaced it with anything until now. And now we see chaos. People can't get the code, they don't know what money they're getting from local government, and the National Day Nurses Association says it's a mess. What's he going to do to clear up this mess?
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot in that question. On the Sure Start point, we're rolling out family hubs, which will actually be a lot broader than Sure Start centres were, and cover children up to 25 where they have special educational needs. And on the codes issue that he references, I think he already knows, we've worked with HMRC to provide a solution to that for all parents, so that no parent will miss out as a result.
Chair of the Select Committee, Robin Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the fact that this government is doubling investment in early years and childcare. As the Secretary of State said earlier with regard to special educational needs, early identification of need is absolutely key. From that perspective, would the Minister meet with me to discuss the urgent need for a specialist assessment centre in Worcester after the loss of the one at Fort Royal? It's gone out for commissioning, but unfortunately we have not had any bids to host the new one, and we need to get on with delivering one for next September.
Can I thank my honourable friend? While I obviously don't know the details of his specific case, I'd be delighted to meet with him to discuss it further.
Shadow Minister Helen Hayes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With just over 2 months to go until the start of the expanded offer for 2-year-olds, the government's plans for early years education and childcare are in complete chaos, with nurseries and childminders across the country still waiting to have their funding rates for April confirmed. How can the Minister expect providers to confirm places with parents when they don't even know what they will be paid? And does he agree with the Chief Executive of the Early Years Alliance that this is yet another example from this government of announce first and do the thinking afterwards?
Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Lady knows that the reason providers don't have their rates at the moment is because local authorities have not informed them of their rates. We publish the rates in November, and it's then up to local authorities to tell their providers. And that is the reason where they don't have those rates. And it's yet another example where the Labour Party hope if they snipe enough from the sidelines, no one will notice that they have no plan whatsoever for childcare.
Russell Moyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are rolling out mental health support teams to schools and colleges, supporting young people to access early intervention for mental health. As my right honourable friend, the Schools Minister, said earlier, as of March 2023, there were 398 of those teams, covering 47% of secondary school pupils. This will increase to around 600 teams by spring 2025.
When I was a young person, we had a counsellor in our school, and it helped many people, not for long-term, but short-term interventions that put people on the right track and meant that they didn't need more expensive interventions down the line. Unfortunately, those have gone in many schools. Labour will reintroduce them. Will the Minister commit to reintroducing a counsellor in every school to ensure that we spend now to save later?
Well, counsellors do have a role, Mr. Speaker, but we believe that through the combination of rolling out mental health support teams, but also giving every state school and college in the country a grant where they can train a senior mental health lead within their school, that is a better approach to take.
Louis French.
Question 13, please, Mr. Speaker.
This government has built one of the most powerful apprenticeship systems in the world, reaching nearly 700 different occupations from level 2 through to master's degree level 7. And it's great that there have been over 5.7 million starts since 2010. There are now over 170 employer design degree level apprenticeships available, including in occupations such as a medical doctor, space engineer, midwife, social worker, pretty much whatever you can name. We're providing an additional £40 million in the next 2 financial years to support providers to expand their offers to make sure that more people can get access to them.
Louis French.
Speaker, the Conservatives have transformed apprenticeships since 2010, with local education providers, employers and Bexley Council all helping to make Bexley one of the top boroughs in London for apprenticeships. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that apprenticeships have a key role to play in both our economy and social mobility, and that whilst Labour wants to focus on teaching divisive ideas such as white privilege in schools, the Conservatives want to support people from all backgrounds to get on in life?
Agree more with the honourable gentleman, my honourable friend, and I know that Bexley's apprenticeship event on the 5th will be a fantastic opportunity for local people to learn about apprenticeships on offer in his constituency. We've transformed our apprenticeship system. People all round the world look at us and say, how on earth have you done that? And I'll be very happy to work with anybody Party to tell you, but all of this is at risk. The Labour Party would halve the number of apprenticeships, taking us back to square one.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, the government did not intervene to save Cumbria's Agricultural College. However, would they decide to invest in agricultural degree apprenticeships, working with the University of Cumbria and Cumbria's FE colleges to make sure we have a pipeline of new leaders who can feed us and care for our environment through farming?
Well, I look forward very much. I know we worked together when I was Apprenticeships and Skills Minister on making sure that we had a right college offer that was sustainable in the area. I'd be very happy to, my honourable friend, the Skills Apprenticeship and Higher Education Minister, would be very happy to work on that. We're looking to expand degree apprenticeships. We do have provision in place to do this, to work with providers, to be able to offer many opportunities, including in agriculture.
We come to Shadow Minister Stephen Malhotra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week is National Apprenticeships Week, and I'm looking forward to celebrating apprenticeships across the country. She knows that SMEs are crucial to delivering high-quality apprenticeships at every level right across our economy. Yet SME apprenticeships have plummeted by 49% since 2016, and research shows that the levy is failing to reverse the decline in employer training more widely. So while she pretends everything is fine, isn't the real answer to back our businesses, giving them greater flexibility to deliver the training we need to get our economy growing again?
Absolutely, and obviously one of the reasons why some of the SME numbers reduced was because we increased the quality and made sure that every single apprenticeship is of high quality, because I want to make sure that every young child like me going on an apprenticeship who's put their trust in the system gets what they deserve. We have removed the limit on caps on SMEs. We are also working to make the system much easier, to reduce the number of SEPs, to make it much easier for them to access the system, and we're also looking at what more we can do. We have a number of focuses to make sure that SMEs, who, as you say, there's many people, 70% of the jobs, so we do need to make sure that apprenticeships work really well for them.
Andrew Selou.
14, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we're committed to funding all schools fairly and equitably wherever they are, and the national funding formula replaces an unjust system where schools receive different levels of funding for no reason.
Andrew Selou.
Whilst it's very welcome that funding for all schools has risen, does the Minister accept that deprivation exists in market towns and villages, and that those areas also have a higher transport costs, and that the difference in funding between the highest and lowest funded local authorities like Central Bedfordshire is thousands of pounds per child, and what can he do to close this gap more quickly?
Mr. Speaker, he is right about the importance of deprivation factors and indeed transport costs, and that is why we're increasing the amount of the formula that goes on deprivation, and there is indeed the sparsity factor. All schools, of course, are benefiting from increases in funding, which will total £59.6 billion in 24-25.
Matt Mann. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to the funding of schools, shouldn't the government just follow the money? Amber Infrastructure, who own the Newman College in Chadderton, took out £80 million of shareholder dividends in its time that it's owned that PFI school. Well, the heating system doesn't work, the roof is leaking, affected 30 classrooms, and now 2 temporary classrooms have to be built to accommodate the pupils. Will the government intervene and say to the provider, if the money's there to take in dividends, it's there to fix a roof too?
Mr. Speaker, I'll be happy to follow up with him on the PFI contract at the college he mentioned, and we'll perhaps have discussions as well with my friend.
Come to Topicals, Emma Hardy.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As mentioned by the Honourable Member for Feltham and Heston, next week is National Apprenticeship Week. And when I did my apprenticeship, Mr. Speaker, I benefited from brilliant training and opportunities thanks to General Motors. It got me to where I am today, and I want to spread those opportunities to everyone, everywhere. This Conservative government has built a new, high-quality apprenticeship system from the ground up. Nearly 70% of occupations are now accessible via apprenticeship, and we delivered 5.7 million apprenticeship starts since 2010. A week today, we will kick off National Apprenticeship Week. So I ask all honourable members to go on a visit to meet apprentices and to talk about the opportunities available all across the country, a real example of levelling up. All my ministers and I will be out across the country celebrating different industries, different providers and with hundreds of apprentices. Mr Speaker, that is why Labour's policy to halve apprenticeships is so dangerous and would remove opportunities for people like me, taking us back to square one.
Emma Hardy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I look forward to fact-check assessing the Secretary of State's comments. With 2,730 children in Hull waiting for their first mental health appointment for over 12 weeks, is it pride or inattentiveness that prevents the Secretary of State from adopting Labour's plan for a mental health professional in every school?
Well, actually, just to fact-check the Honourable Lady, I think the plan is for a mental health professional in every secondary school. The plan that we have on this side of the House is to introduce mental health support team support to every primary and secondary school. So, in fact, as usual, the plans we have, which we're delivering on, are better, they're better thought through, they cover more people, and they get to solve the problem they're intended to solve.
Anna Firth.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Very welcome RAC remediation work is now underway at Kingsdown School in Leigh-on-Sea, meaning that parts of the school will now be open from half-term. However, the school has still not had confirmation, given the extent of the RAC, on whether there will be a rebuild of the school or not. And this uncertainty is affecting remediation, expansion and recruitment plans. Please could we have that confirmation for the school as soon as possible?
Thank you very much. I know my honourable friend has campaigned tirelessly for Kingsdown School. We've completed our questionnaire programme, 100% complete, and all schools have been told if they suspect that they may have RAC. 100% of those have been surveyed. I can confirm we will be removing RAC from our schools for good, either through the school rebuilding programme or grant funding, and we will inform schools shortly once our assessments have concluded. And I know my honourable friend has met with Baroness Barron to discuss Kingsdown School and is meeting again this week.
Shadow Secretary of State Bridget Phillipson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Students at St Leonard's School in Durham are working very hard for their exams, but these students are facing sustained and ongoing disruption. Challenges in doing practical coursework, off-site teaching, being bussed around the city, and all because of RAC, and no firm date for the rebuilding to commence. Mr Speaker, that's just not good enough. It is putting young people's futures at risk. So will the Secretary of State now work with the regulator and exam boards on mitigations for the small number of young people whose life chances are being put at risk by government failure?
As the Honourable Lady knows, we have been working very closely with St Leonard's School and actually all schools who were impacted by RAC. And I'd like to take this moment to thank the head teachers and all the teachers who've done an amazing job to keep 100% now of children in face-to-face education. Of course, what we have done is we have spoken to the exam award bodies, and they have been working with schools and have offered some support in terms of assessments and making sure that they can look at what more needs to be done. But exams are there to assess a moment.
Order. We're having this problem every time. If it's topicals, they're meant to be short and punchy. I've got to get these members in, and all you're doing is stopping the members not getting in. And if that's a ploy, it's not going to work. Sir Michael Fabricant.
My right honourable friend has already mentioned the Sunday Times article, but is she aware that they're comparing not apples and oranges? Because if you are a British student, you go straight in at first year on a degree course. These overseas students they've been referring to are foundation year students, not on the degree course. They're doing the equivalent to A-level exams.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. And of course I agree that on entry requirements we should ensure we're comparing like for like, absolutely, but are being fair on our brilliant domestic students. But I was appalled to see the reporting over the weekend, which clearly showed bad practice in the use of agents, and that is not acceptable. I met with, as I said, UUK and the VCs yesterday, and we're going to sort this out. There's an investigation by the DfE.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It always seems to be the catchphrase of this government, not our fault. And now it applies to childcare too. Not her fault, but that of local authorities. Not her responsibility to deliver on her government's own pledge. Even our own civil servants are saying that some parents just won't get their places. Does she agree with her Children's Minister that no parents will lose out? And will she give that guarantee to the House today? Yes or no?
Yes, and I'm glad the Honourable Lady asked about childcare, because it's yet another illustration of how this Conservative government is delivering for working parents while the Labour Party still don't have a plan. I know what it takes to deliver complex projects. I've delivered many over 3 decades working in the industry all around the world. Given the Honourable Lady's limited experience outside of politics, she should focus on not playing party politics and deliver for hard-working parents.
Ed sites are enormously important. What progress is the government making on its current recruitment drive to increase their number?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. This is a highly competitive training scheme. Between 2017 and 2019, the department filled all 160 of its funded training places per year. Since 2020, all 200 of the funded places each year, and we've now committed to training a further 400 educational psychologists.
Will the Honourable Lady agree with me that we need highly qualified, excellent teachers in every school? Is she worried, as I am, that so many highly qualified, gifted teachers are leaving the profession after just a few years?
Of course I agree, and that's why I'm delighted that we have 27,000 more teachers in our schools since 2010, and we have a retention and recruitment plan with many different facets to make sure that we retain our excellent teachers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Working with one of my secondary schools, John Whitgift Academy, we've created a pilot scheme called Opportunity Grimsby, where Year 8 students and their parents are linked with local businesses, and that will form part of a mentee scheme in the workplace until Year 11. Will my right honourable friend commit to coming to Grimsby and seeing how well it's doing?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted. Would be delighted to come to Grimsby, and can I congratulate my honourable friend for becoming the Apprenticeship Diversity Champion, because she is a skills champion in Grimsby and across the country. What she's doing on careers and mentoring in Grimsby is a model example of what should be done across the country.
John Warren.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This month's Joseph Rowntree Foundation report set out how childhood poverty impacts educational attainment and the consequences last a lifetime, entrenching intergenerational poverty. 42% of children in Newcastle are growing up in poverty. Will she support Labour's call for free breakfast clubs in every primary school to give them the better start in life?
Well, Mr Speaker, we are investing very heavily in breakfast clubs. I'd say once again that this is an area where we think that targeting the support matters, and that includes in secondary schools, not just in primary schools, as the Labour Party suggested.
It's a disgrace that young children are told to cover up the badges so that people don't know which school they go to, or remove the outward signs that they're Jewish. Clearly, security is provided at schools once they get there. But what is my right honourable friend going to do to make sure that children are educated on the evils of anti-Semitism, so that we spread this message right across all schools rather than just single Jewish schools?
My honourable friend is right, and after Holocaust Memorial Day, of course, we are acutely conscious of the continuing need to act against anti-Semitism. One of the things we're doing is of course, launching this new fund for both for schools and for higher education to try and really address anti-Semitism effectively at its root.
Blomfield.
Mr Speaker, applying for the Turing International Mobility Scheme have to do so each year before the Easter deadline. But those from widening participation backgrounds need to know they have the money before they apply, and universities are only getting confirmation of funding some months later in June, July. Now, I'm sure the Secretary of State will agree that Turing should be open to all, so will she press Treasury colleagues for a multi-year funding settlement?
I listened carefully to what the honourable gentleman says, who I have enormous respect for, and we are working to smooth out any issues with the Turing scheme. However, it is worth noting that we've increased the number of disadvantaged students during the Turing scheme to 60%. It was 50% previously, something I'm very proud of. We're embedding social justice within the Turing scheme.
Mark Logan.
Well, students affected by RACs, such as those at Thornley College in Bolton, receive special dispensation in their GCSEs and A-levels. I recently met with the exceptional head teacher, Mrs O'Callaghan. Would like to take this opportunity to wish her all the best in her very well-deserved retirement at the end of the year.
Well, can I join my honourable friend in congratulating, commending and thanking Mrs O'Callaghan in her life's work. I do appreciate the situation with RAC schools has, of course, been very difficult. That's why we're trying to work with them. And on things like coursework assessments, they should be in touch. They should be in touch with awarding bodies. And we're also making sure we're reimbursing all reasonable revenue costs.
I've recently met with head teachers in West Derby who shared with me their serious concerns that the cut-off inspection model is not fit for purpose, deeply unfair and driving teachers out of a profession they love. In light of the Education Committee report today, would the Secretary of State meet with me and the experience of Liverpool West Derby to discuss their concerns and what they feel needs to change?
Well, Mr Speaker, I pay tribute to the head teachers in Liverpool West Derby. We do think it is important to have an independent inspector. We do think it is important that those assessments are clear. In the wake of the tragedy of Ruth Perry, it's also right, of course, that we think about all those aspects. Some of them have changed already, but to be clear, we think it continues to be important to have that clear external assessment for parents to see.
Across Tipton and Wednesbury are still struggling to get initial assessment for children with SEND. Can I ask my right honourable friend what work she's doing to hold organisations such as CAMS to account to ensure these assessments are done quickly?
My honourable friend is exactly right to raise this issue. We're working with all local authorities through our SEND and AP improvement plan to make sure this happens a lot quicker and children get the support they need.
Mr Speaker, school exclusions and suspensions are on the rise. Children who have experienced trauma are at greatest risk of exclusions, which only adds to the overall negative outcome for children with ACEs. Yet the DFT behaviour guidance makes no reference to childhood trauma. Will the Minister meet with the APPG for childhood trauma to discuss how we can develop better guidance to actually make account of childhood trauma?
Well, Mr Speaker, what we want to see is schools not excluding children where at all possible. There's no right number for exclusions. It has to be determined in the circumstances of that school. But we do expect people to look at the whole bag, and I'll, of course, be happy to talk with her.
And the Wheeler.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for her earlier answers about RAC. Would she please give priority to St Edward's School in South Derbyshire following the adjudication of over 80% being affected by RAC for a complete rebuild? And can the plan start very soon, please?
Yes, I can give assurance that we're going through all of the detail and assessing each one on a case-by-case basis, and all honourable members, I know they're very keen to know what will happen, will have the answers very shortly.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr Speaker, the changes in the rules for international student visas and also for their dependents is having a significant impact not only on the number of students coming to universities like the University of York or Russell Group University, but also on the university's finances, which will mean that we'll have to make significant cuts if this visa programme goes to its fruition. So could he meet with Vice-Chancellors and the Home Office together to talk about the impact that this is having?
I thank the Honourable Lady. We have regular conversations with Vice-Chancellors and the Home Office on this issue, but as I say, our target has been over 600,000 students. We've well surpassed that, and we have 36 university researchers coming from outside the UK. So we've got a proud record on international students, and that will continue.
Simon Chair.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. St Peter's Primary School in Budley is an excellent school, but it's being let down by temporary classrooms which are way past their best. Temporary classrooms should be just that. They're not a permanent solution. Further to my letter, which is winding its way through the department, will my right honourable friend meet with me to discuss this matter further?
Mr Speaker, I will.
Go ahead. There we are.
Children's services are struggling, and in too many parts of England, outcomes for children are just not good enough. What conversations has the Children's Minister had with both the Department for Levelling Up in terms of resources and capacity for children's services, and what measures will he take for those councils that underperform, letting children down?
We have very regular conversations with the Department for Levelling Up about this issue as part of our Stable Homes Built on Love reforms to transform the children's social care system, and we take strict action where local authorities are not meeting the requirements.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Bournemouth Christchurch Pool Council are bizarrely taking parents to court to challenge their legal right to secure special educational support for their children, with the council losing 90% of these cases and costing £100,000 every 3 months. Would the Secretary of State join in me in asking the Council to think again and agree to meet with me to discuss SEND provision for Bournemouth?
My honourable friend makes a very important point. We are concerned by any local authority spending too much money taking parents to court. Children need to get the right support in the right setting at the right time, and I'd be happy to have a discussion with him about that.
That completes questions.